Good evening. My name is Beth Bruce, and I am a early literacy coach in the Lake Orion Community School District. And I'm really pleased to present to you tonight a session on early literacy skills and ways that you can support your young learner at home. Early literacy development is really an essential building block to your child's future language, reading and writing development, and learning. Early literacy development includes awareness of books and print and hearing and playing with sounds and words and the relationship between letters and sounds, their vocabulary development, their story comprehension, and so much more. So having a really solid foundation in early literacy is that's really critical to your child's future reading development. And literacy development is really a dynamic process and it really builds over time. So we're going to explore some ways tonight to support these areas. So here are some of the areas that we're going to cover in this session and the critical pieces of literacy development. I'm not going to read over this list, but you can glance over it and hopefully there are some pieces on here that you are looking forward to learning more about. So the first area that we're going to talk about and explore would be concepts of print. So concepts of print basically means, understanding print awareness, book handling, and story elements. And you don't always think about talking about these concepts when you're looking at a book with your child. Especially with virtual learning where kids are just seeing their books on computers, they're not necessarily holding many books. And so that's really important that they have an opportunity to do that and to understand the concepts of print and understand the concepts of a book, right? So just some things that you might want to talk about often, talk about the front of the book. Where's the back of the book? That we read from left to right. That one-to-one correspondence is really important, where as you speak a word, they understand that concept of word, and that they can point under each word as they read or as somebody else reads. Okay, understanding the difference between letters and words and spaces between words is also really, really important. So this next slide just shows you how you could really study a sentence, show them that the words are separated by spaces. You can count the words. One great activity is to take a sentence out of a book, write it down, cut it up, and then have them put it back together again. And then they could even rewrite the sentence. So using reading pointers is really fun. It can support that one-to-one correspondence work and just make it more engaging. You can use things around your house. This is just an example of using a craft stick, maybe gluing an eyeball to it. You can draw the eyeballs on it. You could decorate them with markers or paint. The witchy fingers, another example. Those are much easier to find, of course, around Halloween, but I'm sure there are some websites that still carry little fingers like that. Anything that makes it fun while they're learning how to point to words. Now, eventually there's a point where we want them to remove their finger from the book, like at around a level D. When they're really reading, the finger will actually slow down their fluency. So we want them to start reading with their eyes, and then of course just use their finger at signs of trouble when they need to really look at a word closely, and then take their finger back out of the book. This parent's guide to understanding concepts of print will be in the Padlet, and I'm going to provide you with the link to the Padlet at the end of this session. So what is the difference between phonological awareness versus phonics? So phonological awareness or phonemic awareness is the ability to hear. It's all about listening with the ear, hearing and identifying and manipulating the sounds of language. It's important because it is the primary predictor of early reading and spelling skills in kindergarten through second grade. Sometimes we have kiddos who jump right into reading a little too quickly, and we notice that they're missing some of their phonological awareness pieces like rhyme. And that might not seem like a big deal, but it does show up later on in school when we notice holes in their spelling. So phonics teaches the relationship between the letters of the written language and the sounds of spoken language. And it helps children understand how to decode letters into their related sounds. So basically it teaches children how to decipher words on their own. And it means they ultimately will need less help with reading. So another important part of phonological awareness is rhyme. Rhyming is really fun, and it's a really important part of reading success. Rhyming teaches children how language works, and it helps them notice and work with sounds within words. It also helps children experience the rhythm of language. As they're reciting nursery rhymes, there's a real rhythm and a real pattern to it, and they can have fun with it, and they can speak with animated voices. So there's a few pieces to rhyming. In Lake Orion, we ask children to determine if words rhyme, which we call choice. So we may give them a couple words and say, do these two words rhyme? Cat, hat. And we would want them to say yes. We may say ball, hat, and we would want them to say no. Or we may ask them to supply a word. So we give them two words, cat, hat. Can you give us another word that rhymes with cat, hat? And it could be an invented word. That's okay. It could be a made up word. As long as they're hearing the rhyme, it doesn't really matter if it's a true word or not. We just want them playing around with those words. So again, providing rhyming words is a really great thing to practice. So at home, if you can play songs that are rhyming songs, Jack Hartman has some great YouTube videos that you can play, reading rhyming books, and of course singing and reading those nursery rhymes is great work to do. Here's another activity that I placed on the Padlet. So this is called Rhyme Away, and basically what you would do is you would draw that picture that's on the top of this page on a whiteboard. You can use a sheet protector with a piece of white paper in it to work as a whiteboard. You would draw that picture, and then you would recite the rhyme for the student. And then as you would want them to provide the rhyming word. So in this rhyme with the house, you would say, just for fun, erase the, and then you would want them to say sun. And then your child would erase the sun in the picture. And then you keep going that way until the whole picture is erased. And the kids think it's really fun because, of course, they love erasing. Now, on the other hand, there are some rhymes where they actually are going to draw a rhyme story. So you would recite a rhyme to them, like, for example, when you draw a monster, it is said you always begin with the, and then hopefully they can supply head. If they can't, then you would prompt them and help them with that. But then they, in turn, would start drawing a monster head. And then you keep going. He'll be able to see when he flies if we draw too bright. And then they, of course, would draw the eyes. So by the end, they've created a really cool monster picture. Hopefully it looks like this. And again, all of this is on the Padlet. So blending and segmenting are another really important phonological awareness piece. And blending is a phonemic awareness skill that involves combining individual sounds or phonemes to make a word. And the phonemes are the sounds produced by the letters, not the letter names. So when getting started with it, the children are really not looking at any letters. They're just listening for the sounds. And blending is the opposite of segmenting because it really just assists with decoding the words. It's a process of putting those isolated sounds together to make a word. Blending is really the key skill that students need to be decoding words, breaking a word down into individual sounds, or phonemes is then called segmenting. So segmenting is what you would do to support your child with spelling. It's really a completely different skill, but it's easier to teach. So segmenting cat would be k, a, t, and then blending it back together, of course, you would say cat. And blending sounds is a pre-reading skill like segmenting, but students first develop blending as a phonemic awareness skill when they have a strong understanding of letters and how sounds work, then they can apply the skill to their reading. And generally, students begin to learn blending sounds using the CVC words, which are consonant, vowel, consonant sounds. And this works because, there aren't many sounds to put together. And it also helps that many CVC words are very concrete. So they are words that young children have experience with and they can picture them. So on this slide, you'll see some examples of some things that you can try at home. The first picture with the tree is an Alconen box. And on the Padlet, there's also a video that talks about the importance of using these boxes and how to use them. But essentially, you just want to give the child like a penny or a cute stone or something that they can slide into each box, and each box would represent an individual sound or phoneme. So they can slide in for every sound they hear. The slinky is essentially used the same way. It's just really fun and engaging. So the child could take the slinky and pull it apart for each sound they hear, and then put it back together again to blend the word back together. And that is actually a super fun thing to pull out during writing. So they could stretch out words using the slinky. And then, of course, the race car. You could use any type of vehicle or car that you have at home. And, of course, you could put this paper in between a sheet protector, and then for every sound they hear, they would drive the car down the road, and then at the end they could blend it back together again. I will show you some examples, an example next of using CVC words. So as I mentioned, decoding CVC words is a really great place to start when you're practicing this work. And I have included an example list of CVC words on the Padlet because sometimes it can be hard just to come up with them off the top of your head. And it actually sorts them by the medial short vowel sound. You can have a lot of fun with these words just by having the child change that first letter, and then what would the new word be? That's manipulating sounds, and that is really great practice. Alphabet knowledge. Of course, we know that's super important, right? We can't read without knowing our sounds, and we need to know our letter names. So in Ligorian, we do teach all 26 uppercase, lowercase letters, as well as that book G and that book A that you can see here on the slide. When we ask children to produce the sound of each letter, we do show them the lowercase letter. So that's just important to know if you're working on it at home. So some things that you can do to support this work is, you can have kiddos go on letter hunts in books, searching out the letters. The same thing, you can do the same thing out in the environment when you're going on walks or you're driving around. have them look for each letter in the alphabet and mix it up sometimes. Don't always start at an A. Start in the middle or start at the end of the alphabet, which is fun. So here are just some fun activities that you can try at home. One is right here is with putting letters on muffin cupcake liners, putting it in a tray. On each liner, you would write either an uppercase or a lowercase letter, just make sure they're all the same. And then the beans would have the opposite, so they're matching uppercase to lowercase letters. That's really important because a lot of times when kiddos go to write, we want them to write lowercase, only of course the first letter of each sentence capitalized in names, and then they don't really know what that lowercase letter looks like because if they've only been learning or practicing with uppercase, that can be a struggle. So recognizing the difference between the two is important. This is like a sound game, so you just find some little trinkets around your house that begin with different sounds, and then of course they would match those trinkets up with the letter and the sound into the tray. So you can do variations of this, anything that you can find around your house where they are searching for letters or searching for sounds is really helpful. Snap words. Snap words are also known as sight words, and there's a difference between sight words and high frequency words. So high frequency words are all of those words that make up most of these novel readers that your child is reading right now. They're essentially filled with high frequency words. And when they know the word by sight and effortlessly, then it's considered one of their sight words or their snap words. So everybody's sight words or snap words would be a little bit different because Johnny's words may be that he knows his name and his dog's name and he knows the word soccer, and Julia's sight word bank may be that she knows her mom's name and her name and maybe the word dance, right? So everybody's words are just a little bit different. And children really need to learn these words in context. Learning them in isolation or using flashcards is really not research-based best practice. We know that children can only hold about 50 words in their rote in memory, and then they hit a wall. So that is why when children have only learned their words in isolation, when they come across them in a book, they can't read it. They don't know the word. So really what you want to think is, if children are not thinking about the words, then they're not learning them. They really need to have like a deeper understanding, like understanding the word fun. What do you notice about it? How many letters does it have? How many vowels does it have? How many syllables does it have? Can you compare it to another word? What is the difference? It's the same thing with math facts. Instead of just being able to see 2 plus 2 and know that it's 4, really having a solid understanding of what is a 2 and what is a 4 is much more beneficial. Okay, that's much more research-based. So, because we really want them to be able to write these words and read these words. So in Lake Orion, we do have a process for learning these words. When we introduce them to our students, we have them read it. We do different things. It depends on the grade level, what we have them do. In DK, we do not teach these words, but we do start teaching them in kindergarten. We want them to clap them and stomp them or snap the parts. Name the letters, name the sounds, fun. So we're segmenting that word. What are the vowels? So you'll see this picture of this little girl on what may be like a lily pad and a word. In the past, we may have said, jump to the word went. And if you don't know where the word went is, then that's going to be a little bit hard, right? But instead, have them step on the lily pad, see if they know the word. If not, tell them the word, and then have them go through the steps, studying the word, say it in a sentence, stomping it. That would be that would be best practice, as opposed to just having them quickly jump around from word to word as like a flashcard. I'm going to show you some activities that you could try at home. These are all on the Padlet. The first one would be where you just write the words on a balloon, and then you toss the balloon around, and they have to read the word that is closest to their hand and then say it in a sentence. This one is explained with more detail on the Padlet, but this is basically where you roll a dice, and then whatever number you roll, you have to do something different with the word. Now, if you don't have a dice at home, you can Google online dice, and then you can just have the child roll the dice on a computer screen. A great way to do this is just to have them maybe look at a list of words from their classroom or their word wall and pull out some words that are tricky for them so that they can work on those words. So handwriting. Handwriting is definitely important because we want to be able to read and decipher what our children are writing. And, they're writing for an audience and for a purpose, so it's important that it's at least neat and legible. And generally, if kiddos are struggling with handwriting, a lot of times it is because they have poor fine motor control. And to develop that, we really need kiddos doing a lot of that small muscle work. So for example, stringing things onto strings or pipe cleaners is really a good thing to do. Using Play-Doh or little pinchers, like little tweezers to pick up things, is fun. And it's also developing those small muscles. So another thing that's really helpful is instead of giving them big, fat, chunky pencils, use small, shorter pencils like golf pencils, because what happens is it forces their fingers to go down closer to the tip of the pencil, which is where we want their placement to be for better control. And their hands are small, so the smaller pencils are much more supportive for them. And the reason why I have pens on here, these are my favorite. These are Flair tips, is they're much easier to write with, and they're fun, they're colorful, and the kids don't have to put as much pressure to produce, and it's easier to read. Sometimes kids, you notice, will write really, really light, again, because they're not putting a lot of pressure, again, because their fine motor control might just not be as advanced yet. One way that you can ensure that they have the proper pencil grip is doing the pinch and flip, and I apologize, the word flip is covered up on my face, but if the pencil is laying flat on a table, you just have them pinch it right at the end of the pencil or the pen, and then flip it back. So again, that's pinch and flip it back. And that's just one way to ensure that their fingers are at the right placement. Now, if that's still not working and they go to write and they move their fingers all around again into that fist, then you can purchase like the little rubber pencil grips. Sometimes they have them on Amazon for a couple bucks, and those are really helpful just to force their fingers to go into the correct placement. So let's talk about writing. And I know there's struggle with writing that many of you are facing right now, getting your kids to write anything, come up with a topic. We hear you. So some things that I wanted to mention is that really writing starts with oral language and the opportunity for kids to talk. This is really the foundation on which reading and writing are built. So anytime that you can have your child talk through a story, we call those small moments, something that's happened, taking your dog for a walk, making dinner with you, making their bed, say, oh, wow, we could write a story about that. Maybe you give them a cute little fancy notebook, like their tiny topic notebook that they could collect their ideas in. So when it's time to write, they have some ideas. They could even like jot down a little sketch or a little drawing to remind themselves of their story. But just orally talking through that story is really, really helpful. And just as important is that you're providing authentic writing opportunities for your child. Have your child write out thank you notes to family members, party invitations when we can go to parties once again, right? Let your child make the grocery list. Find a pen pal for your child. That would make writing real. Helping children make the connection between writing and the real world will increase an interest in writing. Always ask your child questions when they write, like ask specific questions about their writing, such as like, well, how did that happen? How did that make you feel? Can you tell me more about that? What are some other words you could use to describe that? That's going to encourage elaboration and more details. And, what I want to encourage you to do is to not give them the word. I know that you want to be super helpful, but giving them the word isn't really the best strategy, because what happens is it makes them rely on you, so that when they go to write independently, they're not really sure what strategies to use. So instead of telling them how to spell the word, say, oh my gosh, well, let's say that word and let's stretch out those sounds. What do you hear? Write down those letters that you hear in those sounds, and then accept whatever they write. We call that invented spelling. So if you're stretching out the word truck, maybe use a slinky like I talked about, or use your arm, truck. They might only hear a T in the K or a T in a C, and that's okay. Especially in DK in kindergarten, we might only see, in DK especially, we might only see some beginning sounds. In kindergarten right now, we would expect to see maybe some beginning, maybe some medial sounds like a vowel, and an ending sound. That would be fabulous. We don't in kindergarten expect to see kids writing vowel teams and digraphs and blends at this point, at this stage in the game. Okay, so yes, you can support them, help them find resources. For example, if they are not sure what a letter looks like, encourage them to get out their alphabet chart. If they want to write a high frequency word and they're not sure how to write it, suggest that they look at their word wall from their classroom. Also, one little tip I can give you is if they're really, really struggling and they're getting frustrated, a lot of our kids are perfectionists and they just want to stop or give up, suggest that they just put a little magic line, just a little line on their paper. It's like a placeholder for, I know something goes there, but I don't know what it is. And then suggest that they just keep writing, because some kids will stop and give up, right? So we don't want that to happen either. So again, just encourage, if you're modeling writing, then again, they're going to want to be a writer. Here's an example of some labeling, which is what we want kids to start with when they start writing letters. We want them to just start labeling their pictures, and this is a beautiful example of that. So, encourage your kiddos to go back through all their pictures in their writing folder and put labels on it, because eventually those labels will get pulled down into sentences. They can add those high frequency words with the words in their labels, and they can make full sentences with them. Read aloud. So reading aloud is one of the single most important things that you can do. And we would love for you to be reading aloud with your kiddo every day. There's a researcher, his name's Lester Lamanek, and he says that kids should be read aloud 7 times a day. Well, we know that that's not always possible, but absolutely reading aloud is critical. And, when you're reading aloud to your kids, maybe at bedtime is the time that you read aloud to them, because at that point kids are really tired. I get that parents are tired too, but that probably isn't the best time for your child to be reading, right? And if you're choosing a fiction book, you can absolutely do some vocabulary work. Pull out a word out of the book and say before you read, say, I have to talk to you about this word that's in this book. It's the word navigate. You might not have ever seen this word before. What do you think navigate means? And work together to come up with a kid-friendly definition of the word. And even better is if you can keep that word alive, like throughout the day, like use it again in your language, say, can you help me navigate around the house to find the car keys, right? So using it over and over again will help solidify that word for them, and it'll, be a new word in their word bank. And again, it just increases their background knowledge. Thinking about comprehension, asking them open-ended questions, words that are like not right there in the book. So questions like, well, how do you think the character feels? Right? Well, why do you think he did that? And how do you know? That's called inferring. And those critical questions that's really hard for a lot of our kids. So the more practice they can have with that, the better, because they're going to be faced with these types of questions throughout their whole school career. And if you're reading nonfiction, let me go back to fiction and also mention, just be careful that you're not stopping too much to teach throughout your fiction books, because then what happens is they forget what the story was even about. So maybe just talk about a vocabulary word in the beginning, maybe a comprehension or question or two, and then maybe at the end they could do a little retelling work. That would be beautiful. And then again with nonfiction, what I would recommend is if they are interested in a topic, if you go to the library and they want to read about snakes, great, but get 3 books on snakes. Because again, we want to build their background knowledge up on that topic. So then have them start with an easier book on snakes, and then they can gradually progress to the harder book, and each one will build on the other. And I know I've heard parents complain before saying, oh my gosh, whenever my kid goes to the library, they come home with this humongous book, this like a 5th grade book on a topic. And parents are thinking, oh my word, I have to read this book. And you don't. You just have them pick a section. What section do you want to read about today? And most importantly, have them understand that they can learn a lot from the pictures. Reading those pictures helps them understand the story. So really looking at the pictures and determining what they can learn from that is great. So we reached the end of this presentation, and I hope that I was able to give you some valuable tips and some things that you can start trying at home today. This is the link to the Padlet. This URL code, you can hover your camera over and it'll take you directly to the Padlet where I have all of these activities and some video links for you to explore on your own time. So enjoy working with your child on these important literacy skills, and we thank you for understanding the importance of partnering with your child's teacher. Take care. Be safe.